I'm Lauren Pierce, 36, and on the night my father turned 71, I stepped into a Marriott ballroom, dressed in gold and burgundy, and felt the air tighten like a ribbon pulled too hard. Framed photographs of bank openings and handshakes ringed the walls, each one a reminder that accomplishment in my family always had a spotlight and a script. I took my seat among distant cousins while my sister Kara's place cards were set close to the head table, a quiet message delivered in cardstock and ink. My mother floated from table to table with that practiced smile that can hold a room together or hold a person in place. My father stood beside the cake, 3 tiers of chocolate and gloss soaking up the applause like the warm lamps bathing his name. At my elbow, Naomi Carter tapped my wrist once the way she does when she senses a turn coming. In my purse, a simple envelope pressed against my palm, small as a matchbox and heavier than regret. Before the candles were lit, I knew this was not just a birthday. It was a reckoning staged in front of 50 witnesses. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments. And if you've ever had to stand still when a room tried to push you, tap like and subscribe. So this story finds the people who need it. I grew up in a 1-story house where we polished the good silver for holidays and ironed shirts on Sunday evenings so Monday would look neat. Respect hard work and keeping your word were the rules that didn't need to be written. My father's voice carried through our walls, even when he spoke softly, the way a banker's certainty can sound like a closed door, and my mother made sure we said thank you twice, once with our mouths and once with our behavior. I was the kid who learned to love ledgers, who found comfort in columns lining up, who paid for textbooks with night shifts and coffee that tasted like pennies, and when I failed the CPA exam the first time, I bought more pencils and started over. Kara was sunshine that ran hot. Ideas poured through her like summer rain, but umbrellas and permits did not, and when things fell apart, she often fell into someone's open arms. I kept my hands busy, quiet, steady, dependable, because that's how you pass a test and that's how you pay a bill. By the time I opened my own small practice, the waiting room chairs didn't match and the printer jammed if you looked at it wrong, but the books balanced and the clients came back. I learned the rhythm of small business owners, the bakery that starts at 4 a.m, the auto shop that stays late when a family needs a car by Friday, the florist who remembers everyone's anniversary but her own. I saved each month even when saving felt like sweeping the ocean back with a broom, because one day I wanted a 2-bedroom condo with a door that closed on a room of my own. The money wasn't a trophy. It was breath first home, down payment emergency cushion, a tiny black line between I'm fine and I'll figure it out. In that newness, I carried the old rules with me: kindness, integrity, humility, and a careful record of promises mine and everyone else's. Walking into that ballroom pulled me into a different climate. Carved ice, high ceilings, speeches, waiting in pockets where your place was measured by proximity and the way people turned when your name was said. Kara arrived late, flushed and beautiful, with Derek hovering at her shoulder, thumbs working a phone like it might solve something on its own. My mother's arms opened and the two of them folded into a whisper that sharpened as it shortened. I didn't have to hear the words to know when a stage is being built. Naomi leaned in and asked about my week, the way real friends do when the floor starts to tilt, and I told her tax season was heavy but manageable, which was true and not the thing I needed to say out loud. My father caught my eye across the room, lifted his glass, and gave me the kind of smile that makes a person look down at their shoes polished, yes, but not invited to the head table. I have always believed that trouble announces itself if you know how to read a room. The hush that comes a few seconds too early. The scrape of a chair when people want to see better, the way a microphone squeals and then behaves. As the first slices of cake were plated and passed, my father rose, shoulders squared the lights, catching the edges of his cufflinks like small steel moons. He thanked everyone for coming, for honoring his years of work, for reminding him that family is the investment that never fails. The audience hummed along with him, nodding at the cadence they've known for decades. Naomi's hand found mine under the table and rested there steady and cool, and the envelope in my purse felt less like paper and more like a key. My father lifted his glass higher and said there was something important he needed to address, something about responsibility and love, and the room leaned toward him as one waiting for a declaration that wasn't on the printed program. My father's glass caught the light as he cleared his throat, the same sound that used to hush our whole house when I was a child. The room stilled 50 conversations folding into quiet as he thanked everyone for celebrating his 71 good years. His voice carried the smooth authority that once closed mortgage deals and now commanded family loyalty. My mother stood beside him, one hand resting on his shoulder as if to anchor the moment. Then his tone shifted, subtle but heavy, and every instinct I had told me something was coming that didn't belong in a toast. Family, he began, is about responsibility, about standing together when times are hard. The words had a weight that made people lean forward. Napkins paused midair. And tonight, I want to share a matter that affects all of us. The air thickened as my stomach dropped. My mother gave him a small nod, the kind couples share when rehearsed lines are about to begin. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Kara glance down her fingers, twisting the napkin in her lap. He smiled, then a practiced public smile, and said, "My younger daughter and her husband have been struggling to keep up with their mortgage. They've fallen behind and the bank plans to foreclose next month. But I'm proud to say our family won't allow that to happen. Lauren has agreed to cover the amount." The room went silent. The sound of silverware stopped mid-clink. My wine glass hovered in the air, the liquid trembling with my hand. "I'm sorry," I said before I could stop myself. "What?" My mother's tone turned soft and sugar-sweet, the way she used to sound before a lecture. "Don't be modest, sweetheart. You've done so well for yourself, and this is what family does. We lift each other up." Her voice carried easily, designed for an audience. Kara dabbed at her eyes, leaning toward our mother, as if to be shielded from the spotlight. Around us, whispers fluttered through the room. Uncle Frank murmured something about family values, and Aunt Linda nodded with approval. My father's former colleagues exchanged polite glances, unsure whether to clap or keep still. I haven't agreed to anything, I said quietly, each word deliberate. The warmth drained from my father's face. "Your sister is drowning, Lauren. Her children are at risk of losing their home. You make more in a year than Derek has made in 3. Surely you can manage this." Kara's shoulders trembled. "It's fine," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "Lauren doesn't understand what it's like to have kids and see everything falling apart. I'll figure something out." Her voice broke at the perfect moment. The sympathy in the room tilted her way instantly. Poor Kara, the devoted mother. Cold, successful Lauren. Naomi's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent reminder to breathe. I could feel her phone on the table near my elbow, its small red light quietly recording. She'd seen my family turn moments like this into spectacles before. My mother clasped her hands. "We're not asking for charity, honey, just family helping family. You can afford it." Dozens of eyes turned toward me. It was the kind of silence that hums, waiting for the expected answer. My pulse thundered in my ears. "The mortgage total, my father said, is $180,000. The bank expects payment within 30 days. Someone let out a low whistle. Aunt Linda muttered, "That's a lot, but she's always been good with money." Others nodded, murmuring agreement. My throat felt tight. That number was my entire future, 5 years of saving the foundation for the home I dreamed of owning. Every late night during tax season, every client call I'd answered from my kitchen table, every piece of that savings carried the hours I couldn't get back. Kara reached across the table, her voice trembling. "Please, Lauren, the kids can't live in a car. You have no idea how terrifying this is." Caleb and Maya sat near her, wide-eyed and confused. The boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Are we really losing our house, Mom?" She hugged him close, shooting me a look sharp enough to cut glass. I took a slow breath. "That money is my down payment for my first home," I said evenly. "It's everything I've worked for." "Your nephews might be sleeping in a shelter," my mother said, her tone now icy beneath the sweetness. "And you're talking about paint colors." The murmurs grew louder, a tide of opinions filling the space. Cousin Paige whispered, "Must be nice to have that kind of money." Uncle Frank shook his head, saying something about selfishness being a curse. The walls seemed to close in as their voices blended, judgment disguised as concern. "Have you even asked why they're in this situation?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice. Derek hasn't worked in 2 years. Kara has started 3 businesses and abandoned each one. They bought a house they couldn't afford. How dare you judge them? My father snapped. His voice boomed, carrying the authority of decades behind a desk. Not everyone gets lucky like you. Lucky. The word caught in my throat, sharp and bitter. You call 10 years of night classes and double shifts lucky. He slammed his palm on the table, making the silverware jump. Enough. You'll help your sister or you'll forget this family. Naomi looked up, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Pierce, maybe this isn't the time or place. Stay out of this, my mother hissed. This is family business. Naomi's brow arched slightly. Then it shouldn't be a public announcement. Her words didn't slow them. My mother stood, placing a hand over her heart. Lauren, I know you don't have children, so you can't understand what it feels like to lose everything. Every night, Kara lies awake wondering if her kids will have a roof over their heads. Every morning she faces that fear again. Around the room, people nodded sympathetically. Kara's tears streamed freely now, a perfect picture of maternal despair. I felt the old guilt tug at me, the reflex to fix things, to make peace, but it stopped at the edge of exhaustion. If you won't help her, my father said, lowering his voice to a razor's edge, then you're no longer part of this family. We'll change the wills. You won't be welcome at holidays. You'll be dead to us. My mother echoed him softly as though sealing a vow. Is that really what you want? Lauren to be an orphan by choice? The words burned, but the fear they expected never came. I'd lived under this kind of threat for years, conditional love with fine print. Still hearing it aloud in front of 50 witnesses carved something final into the air. So if I don't hand over my savings, I said slowly, I'm not your daughter anymore. That's exactly right. My father answered, his expression flat as stone. Around us, people watched like it was theater. Some were embarrassed, others enthralled. A few, Mrs. Hartley Gerald Stone, looked away, their discomfort written across their faces. Kara wiped her eyes, her voice small. Then I guess I really don't have a sister either. She pulled her children close as if I were the threat. Naomi's phone rested on the table, the red light still glowing faintly. My purse felt heavier against my side, the envelope inside, waiting silent and certain. Is that your final decision? I asked. My father straightened. It is, and everyone here is a witness. He nodded, once proud, even in cruelty. The chatter resumed quietly, nervous laughter covering unease. Naomi stood beside me, calm as ever. Before Lauren leaves, may I ask a question? My mother frowned. We said this is family business. Naomi's smile was polite, her words measured. Oh, I think it involves more people than you realize, especially those who've been asked to help before. The room stilled again. My father's jaw tightened. Kara's eyes darted toward Naomi, then to the envelope peeking from my purse. Derek shifted uncomfortably, avoiding everyone's gaze. I placed my hand on the envelope, feeling the crisp edges beneath my fingers. Naomi, I said softly, I think it's time. Her nod was small, but certain. That single motion, the quiet agreement between us, was the moment everything in that room began to turn. The birthday lights still shimmered on the walls, but the celebration had already ended. Naomi's calm voice carried through the noise. Before Lauren leaves, she said, Shouldn't everyone hear what actually led to this point? My mother's lips tightened, the kind of polite smile meant to hide irritation. My father shifted, his face flushed, his grip tightening around the stem of his glass. Kara's eyes darted toward Naomi, then down to her folded hands. The tension in the room changed shape. It wasn't sympathy anymore. It was curiosity. People leaned forward, waiting for the next act in a play they didn't realize they'd been watching all night. Naomi's phone still rested on the table screen, down recording light, faint but steady. For the record, she said evenly, this conversation has been documented, not for drama, but for accuracy. My father bristled. That's unnecessary, he snapped. It's a private family discussion. Naomi didn't flinch. In a hotel ballroom surrounded by 50 people. There's no expectation of privacy here, Mr. Pierce. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances. The polite pretense of celebration was gone. I reached into my purse, feeling the envelope's edges beneath my fingers. My father's words still echoed in the air, disowned, dead to us, but they no longer had the sting he intended. The paper felt heavier than it should, the way truth often does when it's about to surface. I placed it on the table, my hand steady. "Naomi," I said quietly, "I think this is the right time." Kara froze. Derek's head snapped up from his phone for the first time all night, his expression unreadable. Naomi nodded once, her calm, a quiet kind of authority. "Before Lauren leaves this family forever," she said, "perhaps you all should know about another agreement, a legal one." My father frowned. What agreement? Naomi's voice was measured professional. "The one Kara signed 5 years ago when she borrowed $50,000 from your older daughter." The ballroom fell silent. You could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint clink of ice settling in glasses. My mother blinked rapidly, confusion sweeping over her face. "What loan?" she asked, looking between us. Kara never mentioned I slid the envelope forward until it rested in front of my father. "This one." The brown paper looked plain, almost harmless, but Kara stared at it as if it were about to explode. My father's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a notarized promissory note with her signature and a gold seal gleaming under the chandelier. His expression shifted first disbelief, then recognition, then anger. "This is real," he said finally, his voice low. Kara's face drained of color. "That was supposed to be an investment," she whispered. "We agreed on that." "You agreed to repayment," I said. 24 monthly installments starting June of 2019. Naomi scrolled through her phone and read the terms aloud. Principal $50,000, 5% annual interest, compounded monthly. Her tone stayed calm, professional, like she was back in a courtroom. "By our calculations, that brings the current balance to roughly $67,000. Gasps rippled through the room. Aunt Linda shook her head in disbelief. "Charging your own sister interest," she exclaimed. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who put the terms in writing," I replied, "because I was told I'd be repaid." And I wasn't. Kara's tears returned this time sharper. "You're heartless," she spat. "You're using paperwork against your own family." My father looked torn between pride and fury. "You learned well," he muttered under his breath. "Document everything. I taught you that." Then louder to me. "But you could have handled this privately." "Privately?" Naomi asked. "You just threatened to disown her in front of 50 witnesses." That silenced him. Kara's husband shifted in his seat, rubbing his jaw. "Maybe we should just," he started, but his brother Evan spoke up from across the room. "Don't even try, Derek. You've been covering for her long enough." My mother turned startled. "What's that supposed to mean?" Evan's voice was tight. "It means this isn't just about one loan. Kara's been asking everyone for money. I lent her $5,000 last spring, said it was for Caleb's school fees. Turns out it went somewhere else." Kara's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "That's not true," she said sharply, but Derek didn't look at her. His fingers tapped the table in a steady rhythm, jaw set. Naomi's tone softened slightly. "Kara, this is your chance to be honest." The room waited. Kara's gaze darted from her husband to our parents, then to the guests who were already whispering behind napkins. "You're all turning on me," she said, voice trembling. "You have no idea how hard I've tried." Derek spoke for the first time, his voice hoarse. "Tell them about the credit cards." My mother frowned. "Credit cards." "She opened 3 in your name," he said quietly. "Totaled $28,000. My mother's hand went to her chest. "In my name?" "That's impossible. I only have 1 card. She used your Social Security number while you were recovering from surgery," he continued. "They're maxed out." A stunned silence followed. Kara's face twisted, half panic, half defiance. "That's not how it happened," she said quickly. "I just needed time." "You committed fraud," Naomi said evenly. "Identity theft. And you did it to your own mother." My father's voice broke the stillness. "Is this true?" Kara looked down at the tablecloth. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The weight of the truth sank into the room like heavy sand. The same people who'd been nodding along minutes ago now couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Uncle Frank muttered something under his breath, and Aunt Linda pressed her napkin against her forehead, as though it might block the reality in front of her. I unfolded another paper from the envelope, a spreadsheet printed in neat black lines. Since we're being transparent, I said, this is the full record of every loan and gift over the last 10 years. 15 entries totaling $130,000, not counting the cards she opened in Mom's name. My father looked at me, then at the paper, the fight draining out of him. You kept records of everything you always told me to, I said. Kara's tears turned to fury. You think you're so perfect, she shouted. You've always looked down on me. You don't know what it's like to be compared to you every day. My mother whispered Kara, but she didn't stop. You got the brains, the career, the respect. I just wanted to prove I could make something of myself, and nobody ever believed in me. Naomi's voice stayed calm. You had chances, Kara. Many people tried to help you. But deception isn't proof of effort. It's proof of desperation. Kara sank back into her chair, trembling. Derek's shoulders sagged. You should have told them, he said softly, before it got this far. Naomi turned to my parents. You both need to contact the bank tomorrow to freeze any credit associated with your names, and you'll need a police report. Otherwise, those debts will stay attached to you. My mother shook her head, dazed. I can't report my own daughter. Then you'll be responsible for what she's done, Naomi replied. No one spoke for several long seconds. Even the waitstaff stood frozen near the doorway. The birthday decorations looked absurd now, balloons, drooping streamers sagging over untouched cake. I gathered the documents back into the envelope, sliding it shut. You wanted a decision? I said quietly, looking at my father. Now you have one. I won't fund her mistakes anymore. My father's shoulders dropped, the certainty gone from his face. My mother's eyes glistened with tears she didn't wipe away. Kara stared at the tablecloth lips pressed together, hands twisting in her lap. I stood smoothing my dress, my pulse steady for the first time all night. I'll expect repayment of the documented loan within 90 days, I said. If not, I'll pursue it formally. Naomi rose beside me, calm and professional. Mr. and Mrs. Pierce, I strongly recommend consulting counsel. The recording and these documents establish clear evidence of fraud and coercion. My father looked at me, something between disbelief and weary respect in his eyes. You're really walking away from us, he said softly. You already did, I answered. I picked up my purse, the envelope inside once again. Around the room, people whispered, some shocked, others nodding quietly. Mrs. Hartley was the first to clap, slow and deliberate. Gerald joined her, then Evan. It wasn't applause for drama. It was acknowledgement that truth had finally been spoken. My mother's voice trembled. Lauren, please. I paused at the doorway. I'm honoring your words, I said. You said I was no longer family. Naomi touched my arm. Together we walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the stunned faces and the wreckage of a birthday that had turned into a reckoning. Outside, the night air felt cooler, the city lights reflecting off the parked cars. Naomi handed me her phone, the screen glowing. The recording's clear, she said softly. Every word. I nodded once, feeling the heaviness of what had just happened settle into something different, something like quiet relief. Behind us, faint through the glass doors, I heard Derek's voice rise sharp and final. I want a divorce. The sound faded as the doors closed, and the silence that followed felt like the first honest moment of the entire evening. Naomi and I didn't speak again until we reached the parking garage. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed off the concrete, the sound of a night that had gone far past pretending. I could still feel the vibration of my phone against my palm, missed calls, messages, and a dozen unanswered notifications from family members who'd already begun rewriting the story. When Naomi unlocked her car, she turned the phone screen toward me. The recording was still running, the red light steady and bright. It's all there, she said. Every threat, every admission, every word. I sat in the passenger seat staring at the hotel lights reflecting off the windshield. My body felt heavy, but not broken. It was the weight of years settling all at once. Naomi stopped the recording and exhaled. You did exactly what you had to, she said quietly. And now you have proof." By the next morning, the fallout had already begun. I woke to messages from unknown numbers, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, aunts, uncles, even my parents' old friends. The words were all variations of the same thing: shock, accusation, confusion. But just a few said they were proud of me. I didn't reply to any of them. I left the phone on silent and went for a walk, the early light filtering through the trees, trying to remember what peace sounded like. At 9, Naomi called. "It's spreading online," she said. "Your sister posted about it." She sent me a link. The post had Kara's smiling family portrait attached and a caption written like a public plea. "My heart is broken. My sister turned her back on me and my children when we needed her most. Please pray for us." Within minutes, comments poured in, people who had no idea what happened, telling her to stay strong, calling her brave. But then came the ones from the party. Mrs. Hartley commented first, "I was there. That's not what happened." Gerald followed, his tone sharp. "Charles, I worked beside you for 20 years. I'm appalled by how you treated your daughter." Then Evan's words appeared plain and final. "My sister-in-law is a gambling addict who stole from our family. My brother is filing for divorce." Kara deleted the post an hour later, but by then the damage had spread in both directions. Naomi's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "They're panicking," she said. "Your father called my office twice asking for a statement." I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and began sorting through my files. Every document, every receipt, every bank statement Kara had ever touched, I compiled them into a single folder. Years of small rescues and quiet cover-ups laid bare in rows and columns. When I was finished, I sent the files to Naomi and closed the computer. For the first time, there was nothing left to hide. By evening, the calls stopped. The silence felt heavier than the noise. 3 days passed before I heard from anyone again. It was Uncle Frank, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Lauren," he said, "I didn't know the half of it. I thought you were being stubborn. I was wrong." Then he paused, clearing his throat. "If you need anything, you call me." I thanked him and hung up. It was strange how quickly a lifetime of certainty could crumble in one night. Kara didn't call, but Derek did. His message was short. "Thank you for finally saying it out loud. I'm filing for divorce. The kids and I are moving in with Evan for now." He attached a photo of Caleb and Maya sitting on a couch, smiling awkwardly, like they weren't sure if it was okay to be happy. I stared at that picture for a long time. 3 weeks later, Naomi called with updates from her law partner. "Your father reached out," she said. "He's asking about repayment options for the loan." I frowned. "He's paying it partially. It seems they took a home equity loan to cover part of what Kara owes you and the fraudulent credit cards. The number they offered was $40,000 less than the full amount, but enough to close the legal loop. Naomi's advice was simple. Take it. You've made your point. Let the rest go before it eats any more of you." The payment arrived 2 weeks later. No note, no apology. Just a cashier's check folded neatly inside a plain envelope. I deposited it and never looked back. In the months that followed, the family split clean down the middle. Some relatives insisted I'd humiliated my parents, that I could have handled it privately. Others said I'd saved them all from years of manipulation. Even those who disagreed couldn't deny what the evidence showed. My parents stopped attending church for a while. My father stayed at work later, avoiding the gossip. My mother looked thinner the last time I saw her name pop up in a tagged photo. Her smile stretched too wide to be real. Naomi said they were still helping Kara with legal fees, though it wouldn't save her from the charges tied to my mother's stolen identity. 6 months after the party, I received a letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from Kara. The words were uneven, written in blue ink that faded halfway down the page. "I'm sick, Lauren. I know that now. Gambling took more from me than money. It took judgment, pride, and everything that was real. I'm in counseling. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm trying to change." She didn't mention the money or the wreckage she'd left behind. But it wasn't an apology I'd been waiting for. It was honesty. And that was more than I'd ever gotten before. I set the letter on my kitchen counter beside a small houseplant that leaned toward the light. My condo was finally mine, papers signed, keys in hand. It wasn't the one I'd dreamed of years ago, but it was quiet, bright, and entirely my own. The first night there, I sat on the couch, surrounded by boxes and soft lamplight, listening to the hum of the city outside. The space smelled like paint and cedar, and for once the air felt clean. Naomi stopped by with takeout and a bottle of wine. She set 2 glasses on the counter and nodded toward the half-unpacked boxes. "Feels good, doesn't it?" "It feels real," I said. We ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. She raised her glass once, tapping it gently against mine. "To boundaries," she said. "To peace," I added. The months ahead unfolded quietly. Derek finalized the divorce and gained primary custody of the children. Kara entered a court-mandated rehab program for gambling addiction, followed by community service. She was given probation for the identity theft charges, spared jail only because the credit card companies pressed charges before my mother did. When summer came, I got a card from Derek with a picture of Caleb and Maya at a park, smiling for real this time. On the back he'd written, "They're sleeping through the night again. Thank you for giving them back a little stability." The next time Naomi and I met, she showed me a small stack of thank you notes she'd received from women in her support group, people who'd watched the recording once it spread quietly through professional circles. "You'd be surprised how many people needed to hear that saying no isn't cruel," she said. I nodded. It wasn't the story I'd wanted, but it was the one I'd needed. The last time I saw my parents was at the grocery store that fall. My mother was standing in the cereal aisle, her hand resting on a cart, her expression distant. My father was a few steps ahead, studying a list. When she saw me, she hesitated, then gave a small nod. "You look well," she said softly. "So do you?" I answered, though it wasn't true. She looked down, adjusting a bag of apples. "We didn't mean for it to go that far." "Neither did I said. My father turned, then his eyes meeting mine for the first time in months. He didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. It was enough a silent truce, not forgiveness. As I walked out of the store, the air outside was sharp and cool. The leaves had started to turn gold and rust against a pale sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's debt, emotional or otherwise. I unlocked my car, set the groceries on the seat, and glanced at my phone. A text from Naomi waited on the screen. "Dinner tomorrow. We'll celebrate the boring kind of peace." I smiled, started the engine, and watched the road ahead stretch open under the fading afternoon light, unaware that the next chapter of healing was just beginning. Winter settled over the city like a quiet exhale, the kind that makes every sound feel sharper, every thought more deliberate. By January, 3 months had passed since that night in the ballroom, and the pieces of my life had found new places to rest. I was still in my condo, my space, my silence, my peace. But the echoes of what happened hadn't disappeared completely. Some mornings I'd still wake up expecting my phone to ring, half dreading, half hoping it would be my parents. But when it did, it was never them. It was Naomi checking in before work, her voice steady as always. The legal dust had mostly settled. The loan repayment had come through in parts $40,000 from my parents, and the rest scattered through the sale of Kara's SUV. Naomi had insisted I take what was offered. "You don't need to win every battle," she told me. "Just make sure the truth stays intact." She was right. The documents, the recordings, the witnesses they'd done, what I couldn't in words alone. They made the truth visible. Still, there were moments when the silence between my parents and me felt heavier than the chaos ever did. I'd see small reminders, an old photo tucked into a book, my mother's handwriting on a holiday card from years ago, and for a few seconds I'd feel the sting of what we'd lost. But then I'd remember how it felt to stand in that ballroom surrounded by people who'd cheered my humiliation, and the sting softened into distance. Kara's situation had changed more than anyone expected. After the divorce, Derek had moved the children into a small apartment near Evan's place. He called once in early February to ask if I could help with Caleb's school project, something about financial literacy. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I agreed, and a week later I met them at the library. Caleb greeted me with the same enthusiasm he always had, holding up a folder filled with graphs and charts drawn in colored pencil. "Dad says I should talk to you about budgets," he said proudly. You're the best at that. We sat at a corner table, and for an hour, I walked him through how to track expenses, save for goals, and plan for what's next. Maya colored quietly beside us, sketching little houses and trees in the margins of her notebook. It wasn't a grand reunion, it was gentle, small, and exactly what it needed to be. When they left, Derek thanked me. "They miss you," he said simply, "but they're better now. Stable." Later that night, I found a note in my bag, written in Maya's uneven handwriting. "Aunt Lauren, I like your new house. It feels safe." I kept it on my refrigerator. By spring, Kara had finished the first phase of her rehab program. Naomi received an update from the court's liaison. She was complying with her treatment plan and had started a part-time job at a call center. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the first steady work she'd had in years. She hadn't reached out, and I hadn't expected her to. The distance between us wasn't anger anymore. It was space. Necessary, steady space. One evening in March, Naomi came by with dinner and a small envelope. "You've got mail," she said, handing it to me. The return address made my breath catch. It was from my parents. Inside was a single page in my mother's careful script. "Lauren, we've been trying to find the right words. Your father and I are still coming to terms with everything that's happened. We know we made mistakes. We also know we can't undo them. We hope in time you'll consider speaking with us again." There was no apology, not directly, but there was an acknowledgement, a first step. Naomi read it quietly, then set it on the counter. "They're reaching out," she said. I nodded. "I don't know what to say yet." "Then wait until you do." A few weeks later, I did. I wrote back short and honest. "I'm willing to talk when you're ready for an honest conversation. Not about money, but about respect." Then I mailed it and let time do the rest. 2 weeks after that, my father called. His voice sounded older, like someone had turned the sharpness down a notch. "Lauren," he said, "your mother and I would like to see you. No expectations, just dinner." Naomi encouraged me to go. "Boundaries aren't walls," she reminded me. "They're doors you control." So I said yes. Dinner was quiet, held at their house, the same one I'd grown up in. The smell of my mother's roast filled the air, familiar and foreign all at once. The table was smaller now. No centerpieces, no extra guests, no unspoken agenda. My father spoke first. "We've been to therapy," he said almost awkwardly, "the kind that makes you talk about things you'd rather not." My mother gave a small, fragile smile. "We didn't realize how much we leaned on you to keep things steady," she said. "It wasn't fair. For a long time I didn't say anything. I just listened. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. I needed you to see me as more than a resource." They both nodded, and for the first time there was no argument waiting in the air. We didn't solve everything that night, but the tone had changed. The sharp edges were gone. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of something softer. After that dinner, I called Naomi. It wasn't perfect, I told her, but it was calm. "That's progress," she said. "Calm is where real healing starts." Spring turned to summer, and the days began to stretch longer. The children visited often now, weekends filled with bike rides, movies, and messy pancake breakfasts. Derek would drop them off with a wave and pick them up in the evening, sometimes staying for coffee. We didn't talk about the past much. We didn't need to. It was written in the quiet respect between us. One afternoon, while the kids were in the yard, Naomi stopped by with paperwork for a small workshop series she'd been developing financial literacy for women rebuilding after crisis. She wanted me to co-lead. "You've lived what we're trying to teach," she said. "It means more coming from you." I hesitated, then agreed. By the end of summer, we'd hosted 3 sessions at a local community center. Women came with stories that sounded too familiar. Family debts, drained savings, years of being told they were selfish for wanting stability. Each time I watched their faces change when they realized they weren't alone. The last session ended with a woman named Janine standing up and saying, "I thought boundaries meant pushing people away, but now I see they mean protecting the good parts of me." Everyone nodded, including me. As we packed up that night, Naomi smiled. "You turned everything they used against you into something that helps other people. It wasn't pride I felt, it was peace, the quiet kind that stays." That fall, I visited my parents again, this time by choice. The air had that early chill that hinted at the first frost. My mother made tea. My father set out plates without ceremony. We talked about the children, the workshop, everyday things. Before I left, my father handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for a small donation to the community program Naomi and I had started. "In honor of what you've built," he said simply. I thanked him, tucking it into my purse. Driving home that night, the city lights blurred against the windshield. For the first time, the past didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a boundary line I'd learned to honor. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw the porch light glowing warm against the dark Naomi's car parked out front. She waved from the steps. "I brought takeout," she said with a grin. "Let's celebrate the boring kind of peace." I laughed, unlocked the door, and let her in. The smell of food filled the air, and somewhere beyond the open window, I could hear the faint sound of children's laughter echoing down the street. It was the kind of night that reminded me that sometimes the smallest moments, quiet dinners, honest words, steady friendships, are what rebuild a life after the storm. And though I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for sure: I would never again trade peace for approval. The workshop Naomi and I built started small, one evening a week in the basement of the community library. The walls were lined with books on budgeting and self-employment, and the folding chairs creaked whenever someone shifted. The women who came weren't there for theory. They came with checkbooks full of crossed-out numbers, foreclosure letters folded into purses, and the kind of quiet determination that doesn't need applause. Naomi handled the legal side, how to protect assets and document agreements, while I walked them through simple tools, the same kind I'd once used to rebuild my own life. At first, I wasn't sure anyone would relate to me, but the more we talked, the clearer it became that financial abuse has many shapes: partners, hiding debt, siblings using guilt parents, demanding repayment for love. Every story carried echoes of something I'd lived. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about permission to stop apologizing for surviving. After one session, a woman named Claire lingered while the others packed up. She told me she'd left a 20-year marriage where her husband controlled every dollar she earned. "It took me months just to buy a cup of coffee without guilt," she said. "But tonight I opened my first savings account." She smiled through tears, and something inside me eased. That night I realized healing wasn't about distance from the past. It was about using it to light the way for someone else. By early winter, the workshops had grown. The community center offered us a bigger room, and the local paper ran a short piece titled "Building Boundaries Through Finance." My father saw it first. He called one evenings in December, his tone uncertain but softer than it had ever been. "I read the article," he said. "It was good, important work." "Thank you," I replied, waiting. He hesitated. "Your mother wants to invite you for Christmas dinner. Small group this time, just family." The pause between us stretched, filled with the ghosts of too many holidays that ended in silence. "I'll think about it," I said. When Christmas came, I went. Not for nostalgia, but to see if the change they'd promised was real. The house smelled the same: cinnamon candles, roasted turkey, the faint scent of pine. The difference was in the atmosphere. No speeches, no pointed comments, no performative smiles. Kara wasn't there. She was still completing rehab, but she'd sent a handwritten card addressed to each of us. My mother passed it around after dinner. Inside, Kara wrote that she was halfway through her program, attending group therapy daily and learning how to live without the rush that had ruled her life for so long. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She thanked us for the distance that forced her to change. My mother's hands trembled as she read the words aloud. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Later, as we washed dishes side by side, my mother looked at me and said, "I didn't realize how much of what I called love was actually control." She dried a plate, setting it carefully on the counter. I see it now in small things, how we used guilt to keep everyone close. It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology. I nodded, letting the silence hold it. After the holidays, life settled into a new rhythm. Naomi and I secured a grant to expand our program, turning it into a formal nonprofit, the Ledger Project. We rented a small office downtown, painted the walls a pale shade of blue, and filled the shelves with binders labeled Hope, Progress, Stability. Naomi joked that she'd never seen me smile so much while labeling files. In February, I received another letter from Kara, longer this time. She wrote about her therapy sessions, the small victories, the bad days when she wanted to give up. She said she was working with a counselor named Denise, who specialized in addiction recovery, and that she'd started teaching financial responsibility classes to other residents. It feels strange she wrote teaching lessons I never learned, but every time I talk about consequences, I think of you. Reading those words, I realized the cycle was shifting. She wasn't asking to be rescued. She was rebuilding. One evening after a long day at the office, Naomi and I stopped by the local cafe near our building. Snow drifted outside, the air thick with the smell of coffee and cinnamon. She looked at me over her mug. "You've come a long way from that ballroom," she said. "So have they," I replied quietly. She smiled. "Maybe, but not everyone finds a way to turn their pain into purpose. You did." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one like small promises against the dark. Spring brought one more change. Derek called again, his voice calm but hesitant. "Kara's almost finished with rehab," he said. "She wants to meet. No kids, no expectations, just a conversation." I hesitated, then agreed. We met in a quiet cafe on a Saturday afternoon. Kara looked smaller somehow, not in body, but in presence, like the weight she'd carried for years had finally loosened its hold. She wore no makeup, her hair pulled back, her hands wrapped around a cup she didn't drink from. "Thank you for coming," she said. I nodded. "How are you?" "One day at a time." She smiled faintly. "I don't deserve another chance, but I'm trying to earn one anyway." We talked for almost an hour. She didn't defend what she'd done or ask for sympathy. She spoke about therapy, about how gambling had been her escape from shame, and about facing the people she'd hurt. "I know it'll take years to fix what I broke," she said, "but I'm done pretending I was the victim." When we stood to leave, she hesitated, then asked, "Can I hug you?" For a moment I didn't move. Then I did. It wasn't forgiveness, it was recognition. The kind that says, "I see the work you're doing, even if it's late." After that meeting, we kept a quiet correspondence. Small steps, check-ins, updates, shared pictures of the kids. It wasn't a restored bond, but it was something solid enough to build on. By early summer, Kara completed her program and began a new job as a customer service supervisor. The court closed her probation early for good behavior. Derek sent me a photo of her attending Caleb's baseball game, standing beside the bleachers with a shy smile. Underneath, he wrote, "She's trying Lauren. I think she really means it this time." That night, I sat on my balcony with Naomi, watching the last streaks of sunset fade over the city skyline. The hum of traffic below blended with the distant sound of laughter from a nearby restaurant. Naomi raised her glass of iced tea. "To second chances," she said. I looked at her, then at the city glowing beneath us. To doing the right thing, even when no one claps for it. We toasted quietly, the sound of glass meeting glass, soft against the evening air. Inside my condo, the old envelope, the one that once held proof of betrayal, sat sealed inside a drawer, no longer a weapon, just a reminder of where the story began. It would stay there untouched until the day I no longer needed it at all. The next morning, I received an invitation in the mail addressed in my father's handwriting. It wasn't for a party or a holiday, but for something else entirely. A charity gala organized by the Ledger Project, co-sponsored by Pierce Financial Group. For the first time, my family's name wasn't being used to silence me. It was standing beside mine. And for the first time in years, I didn't dread walking into a crowded room. I was ready to stand under the lights again, not as someone's daughter or sister, but as my own name. The gala took place in late September in one of those glass-walled hotel ballrooms that overlook the city skyline. The view from the terrace stretched for miles, lights scattered like quiet stars against the dark. Naomi and I arrived early, our names printed on a banner that read, "The Ledger Project, Empowerment Through Accountability." I'd written the mission statement myself, months earlier, but seeing it lit up on a sign made the words feel heavier, more real. Volunteers set up tables filled with brochures, photographs, and stories from women who had completed our financial independence programs. Each story told something different, but the pattern was the same: lost survival and steady rebuilding. The air carried a mixture of nerves and pride, the kind that hums beneath the sound of polite laughter and the clinking of glasses. When the first guests began to arrive, I stood near the entrance beside Naomi. She wore a simple navy dress, hair pinned neatly, her expression calm as always. Then I saw them, my parents walking through the glass doors. My mother looked graceful, but subdued, wearing a dark green dress that matched the emerald earrings she used to save for Christmas. My father held her hand, something I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, the noise of the room seemed to fade. They approached slowly, hesitant, aware of the history that filled the space between us. My father was the first to speak. "It's good to see you, Lauren," he said. His voice had lost that commanding edge. There was something fragile in it now. I smiled politely. "I'm glad you came." My mother's eyes glistened, though she kept her voice steady. "We wouldn't miss it." Naomi stepped forward, shaking their hands with the same professionalism she used in every boardroom. "Welcome," she said warmly. "We're honored you're here tonight." Then she turned to me, offering a small nod before slipping away to greet other guests. As my parents looked around, I saw them pause at a display table near the center of the room. It held photos of our workshop participants, letters of gratitude, and a framed excerpt from one of our first sessions, the one where a woman said she'd finally learned that boundaries protect, not divide. My father read the words carefully. "That's good," he murmured almost to himself. "That's really good." The program began shortly after. Naomi gave the opening remarks, her voice confident and clear. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium, the soft hum of conversations fading behind me. I didn't have a script, only a few handwritten notes in my pocket. I started the Ledger Project with the belief that everyone deserves to understand the numbers that shape their life. I began. But what I've learned is that the math doesn't matter nearly as much as the meaning behind it. Every dollar tells a story of effort, sacrifice, and sometimes survival. The words flowed naturally, grounded in the truth of what we'd built. "We talk about balance sheets," I continued, "but tonight is about another kind of balance, the kind that comes when you stop carrying other people's debts, emotional or otherwise." The room stayed quiet, every face turned toward the stage. When I finished, applause filled the space, not loud or showy, but deep, sustained, genuine. From the corner of my eye, I saw my father rise to his feet. My mother followed. It wasn't a standing ovation from the crowd, it was from them. Afterward, guests mingled again, the music soft and steady in the background. I moved through conversations, shaking hands, accepting kind words, thanking donors. At one point, Derek appeared dressed in a dark suit, his children beside him. Caleb handed me a folded note in careful handwriting. "Congratulations, Aunt Lauren. Mom says she's proud of you, too." My chest tightened. Kara hadn't come, but she'd sent her words through her children. I unfolded the note again, reading the last line twice. She's starting a workshop at her job to help others avoid the mistakes she made. Naomi found me a few minutes later near the terrace doors. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm good," I said, smiling faintly. "Better than I ever thought I'd be." As the evening went on, I found myself standing with my parents near the railing overlooking the city. The night air was cool, carrying a hint of autumn. My father leaned against the railing, hands clasped. "You've built something incredible here," he said quietly. My mother nodded. "We're proud of you, Lauren, truly." The words landed softly, without grand gestures or excuses. They weren't trying to rewrite the past, they were simply acknowledging the present. And that was enough. Before they left, my mother handed me an envelope. "Your father insisted on this," she said. "A donation from us personally, not the company." I took it, surprised. "Thank you," I said. As they turned to go, my father paused. "You know," he said with a faint smile, "your old man learned something from all this." "Oh," I asked. He chuckled. "That sometimes the smartest investment is admitting when you've been wrong." When the event ended, the volunteers packed up tables and stacked chairs, while Naomi and I stood on the terrace watching the lights fade below. The room was quieter now, emptied of noise but full of something steadier. Peace, maybe, or simple closure. Naomi handed me a glass of water, her eyes tired but bright. "You realize you just closed a circle tonight," she said. Maybe I replied, "but it feels more like I finally stopped walking in one." She laughed softly, and we stood there for a long moment, watching the city pulse with life beneath us. Later that week, a newspaper ran a small feature on the event, Local Nonprofit Bridges Families and Finances. The photo showed me Naomi and my parents standing side by side. Kara's note was still pinned to my refrigerator, her handwriting a quiet reminder of how far we'd all come. In the months that followed, the Ledger Project received more support grants, volunteers, new clients. But the part that mattered most wasn't on paper. It was the way my family began showing up quietly, consistently. My mother would drop off home-cooked meals for the workshop sessions, my father offered free consulting to small business owners who attended, and Kara began volunteering remotely through her company's outreach program. It wasn't a perfect picture, but it was real. It was growth. One afternoon, while organizing new files in the office, Naomi looked up from her desk and said, "You know we should make next year's theme about legacy. Not the kind left in wills, the kind built in people." I thought about that for a moment. "Legacy sounds about right," I said. She smiled. "Then we'll call it the Balance of Legacy Gala." I laughed quietly. "You really can't resist a good accounting pun, can you?" She grinned. "You taught me the language." As I locked up the office that evening, I glanced at the framed photo from the gala, my parents beside me, Naomi at my shoulder, and a crowd of faces filled with hope. The story that began with a public humiliation had become something entirely different. And though there were still conversations left unfinished and scars that would take time to fade, I knew one truth for certain: justice wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about rebuilding something stronger from what had been broken. Outside, the city lights shimmered on the glass like quiet applause. I took a deep breath, stepped into the cool air, and walked toward whatever came next, grateful, grounded, and finally free of the weight I'd carried for far too long. It's been almost 2 years since that night in the ballroom, the one that split my life into before and after. I sometimes think about how much has changed since then. Not just for me, but for everyone whose lives were tangled in that chaos. The difference now is that we've all stopped pretending. There's no more performance, no more carefully staged family roles. What's left feels smaller but more honest, and that's enough. The Ledger Project has grown beyond anything I imagined. We started with 1 borrowed room and 6 folding chairs. Now we have 3 offices, dozens of volunteers, and a waiting list for our mentorship programs. Naomi jokes that she spends half her week turning away donors who want to stamp their name on something. But the truth is, we built this by keeping it simple, by teaching people that financial freedom starts with knowing your worth, not just your numbers. Kara now works as an outreach coordinator for one of our partner organizations. She helps women who are rebuilding after addiction and debt, walking them through the same lessons that once broke her open. We don't talk about the past much, but when we do, it's without bitterness. Every so often, she'll stop by my condo after work bringing takeout and updates about the kids. She still carries guilt. I can see it, but she's using it for good instead of drowning in it. Derek remarried last spring. His new wife, Julia, is kind and patient, the kind of steady presence that feels like a second chance, not a replacement. I was at the wedding. So was Kara. Watching her stand beside her children, clapping and smiling through tears, I knew how far she'd come. It wasn't a picture of perfection. It was a picture of grace. My parents come to every Ledger event now. They're not the loudest people in the room anymore. My father prefers to stay in the background quietly, offering financial advice to new business owners who remind him of his younger self. My mother helps organize our donation drives, labeling boxes, and chatting with volunteers like she's always belonged there. Sometimes she'll look at me across a room full of people and smile, not the tight, polished smile I grew up with, but something gentler, unguarded. One evening after a small fundraiser, she and I sat together outside the community center, the sky streaked with the last colors of sunset. She looked down at her hands and said softly, "You were right to walk away, Lauren. We needed to lose you to understand what we'd done." I didn't say anything for a while. There was no need. The apology was already in the air between us, honest and quiet. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always look like a dramatic reunion. Sometimes it's just showing up without old expectations. It's sitting in the same room without bracing for impact. It's hearing "I'm proud of you," and finally believing it isn't conditional. Caleb and Maya come over most weekends. My kitchen has turned into their science lab and art studio. Caleb builds contraptions out of recycled jars and string, while Maya paints watercolor portraits of whoever's in the room. Last week, she handed me one she'd drawn of our family, all of us standing together, a little uneven but smiling. She'd written 3 words at the bottom in her careful, looping handwriting, "Still a family." That paper now hangs on the wall beside my desk at the Ledger Project. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded that family doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It becomes what it should have been all along, a circle of people willing to grow. Sometimes people ask me if I'd go back and change anything. The easy answer would be yes. Who wouldn't want to skip the pain, the public humiliation, the nights spent questioning whether I was heartless or free? But the truth is, those moments carved out the space for everything that followed. The strength, the clarity, the peace. I wouldn't have found them without the breaking first. Naomi once told me that closure isn't something that happens all at once. It's something you earn piece by piece every time you choose truth over guilt, calm over chaos, self-respect over approval. I think she's right. Closure isn't the end of a story. It's the point where you finally stop needing to defend it. When I lock up the office at night, the city lights stretch across the glass just like they did that evening at the gala. The sound of traffic fades into a hum, steady and familiar. I take a breath and feel that same quiet certainty I felt walking out of the Marriott ballroom years ago, the one that told me I'd finally drawn a line between who I was and who I was becoming. If you've ever had to walk away from people you loved just to save yourself, I hope you know this. It's not selfish to stop handing out second chances that cost your peace. It's brave. Boundaries don't end. Love. They teach it where to begin. So tonight, wherever you're listening from, I hope you find the strength to protect your peace the way I learned to protect mine. And if this story spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to start over. Sometimes starting over is how we finally come home to ourselves and to the kind of love that doesn't demand we shrink to fit inside it.